And we have asked, as keynote speaker today, a very dedicated person whom migrant organizations and policymakers have known a lot for his work in the field of remittances. And I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Manuel Orozco. Is Senior Associate and Director of Remittances and Development at the Inter-American Dialogue, which is based in Washington, D.C. He has conducted extensive research, policy analysis, and advocacy on issues relating to global flows of remittances and migration and development worldwide. Dr. Orozco is an adjunct professor of remittances and development at George Washington University, Elliott School of International Relations, and at Georgetown University, where he is senior researcher at the Institute for the Study of International Migration. He frequently testifies before Congress and has spoken before the United Nations. Formerly, he was chair of Central America and the Caribbean at the U.S. Foreign Service Institute. Manuel holds a PhD in political science from the University of Texas at Austin, Master's in Public Administration and Latin American Studies, and Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the National University of Costa Rica. I would like to add in his impressive CV that Manuel is a friend of diaspora organizations wherever they are, Latin America, Asia, and Africa. He has helped a lot of migrants. Anytime you can contact him for any assistance, and that makes him really an important colleague and ally in our work. He is also a member of the board, if I'm not mistaken, of the Hague process, where Franz Baumann, the director, is here at the moment, also sharing with us. So I would like to ask Manuel to give us the overview of leveraging remittances for development. Manuel.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to come to speak to you about this topic of leveraging remittances for development. It's too bad that the gentleman that was here left, because I'm from Nicaragua, and my mother is from León, so she would have been very happy that you're doing this sister city project in Nicaragua on housing, because it will be very close to her. Am I talking? Yes. I was asked to talk to you about the issue of the MDGs and remittances. I think it's an important connection between the two, though sometimes I like to warn people about not to link everything with everything, because often we make mistakes from the design, from the beginning, about what could be possible but is not. And on this particular case, I think it's important to understand the context of the Millennium Development Goals and the context of remittances. In this particular case, there is a context, they are both realities that intersect with each other in very specific ways. And I think the most practical issue in which they intersect is poverty. Both the idea of achieving the Millennium Development Goals was set in mind mostly because of a reality of poverty, the context of globalization, and just the broader issues of underdevelopment. At the same time, migration in itself and the sending of money back home is a response to the problems of poverty. And the fact that people, as they say, had to live out of necessity rather than choice explains a lot of the migration that occurs worldwide. We often talk about 200 million migrants all over the world, which is actually, in my opinion, a very conservative number given the extent to which you see so much labor mobility across borders all over the world. But even in that case, the significance of that is reflected in terms of the money that people send back to their families. And that sending has significant impacts at different levels, at the level of the household, the society, and the nation at large. And when you look at the Millennium Development Goals, there are a number of opportunities where migrants and diasporas in general can participate on that. But I'll pay more attention as we go on over this issue, of the extent to which the diasporas can become involved on these issues. But first I want to just give you a brief review of some of the issues relating to migration and remittances, to then focus more specifically on the ways in which one can think of the link of leveraging remittances for development to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. There is no question that the issue of poverty is really salient when it comes to migration, but we have to put it into a broader context too, in terms of the global economy. People are migrating in large part because there is a marketplace for foreign labor, a demand and a supply for workers from different parts of the world to basically provide their services as most of the time cheap labor, cheap foreign labor. And this is even particularly more important in the case of female labor. In fact, we see that there is a strong relationship between migration and trade. The countries where there is higher trade dependency at the bilateral level between one country and another are also the countries where there is a large volume of migration going on. And it's an intuitive issue, yet people don't think very carefully about it, especially when it comes to negotiating free trade agreements, for example. Right now, the European Union has been engaged in negotiations with all of the Latin American countries. They place significant conditions on the context in which the trade negotiations should take place. And none of those elements included any discussion on labor migration. Yet there is an increasing large of migrants coming to the European Union, resulting in part because of the relationship, the economic relationship that exists between the European Union and Latin America. But definitely there is a strong relationship. Another relationship that deals with migration is political. The countries where there is more stability is where you will find less migration. People move when the political stability in their country is more fragile. And that's an issue that is not often discussed, how democracy and governance really have an implication on the way in which people try to satisfy their basic conditions for a good quality of life. After all, being in a free and stable society are as important as having a job and a good health and a good education. To me, I always illustrate that case in point by putting the case of Cuba. Has high education standards, but is a country whose freedoms are completely curtailed. And yet, the level of migration is significantly large. There are over 2 million migrants, Cubans, living in the country who have left Cuba over the past 30 years as a result of the presence of a dictatorship there. These realities are important because they point not only to the issue that you have a global context that defines the way in which migration is going to take place, but also you have a political context that also influences your decision to migrate. Some of the pioneering scholars on migration, on development, Albert Hirschman, talked about how people will basically have three choices when it came to the political context of their country. And he called it exit, voice, and loyalty. You vote with your feet, you leave the country if the conditions do not allow you to stay, or you protest. But if repression is too hard, you have two basic choices. You either consent to the repression, which is what unfortunately most people do in dictatorships, or you escape. And